Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Arsonist Neighbor Burned Down My House Because I Was Too Loud. I ruined him. TLDR. I was having a party and my neighbor asked me to stop being so loud. I turned down the music and thought that he was satisfied. The next day he tries to set fire to my house for being too loud still, and I call the cops and fire department. He is arrested for arson, and they find he had an entire meth lab in his house that he and his wife were running. They were both arrested, and the whole time he was still saying it was my fault for being too loud. They are both going to jail for a long time for the drug charges and will no longer be my crazy neighbors. So, I have read about a ton of crazy neighbors here on Reddit. By far though, I don't think anything I have read beats how crazy my neighbor was. Usually when I hear about crazy neighbors, it's some old person or a woman trying to control the neighborhood. I didn't actually think that the young couple in their 30s that moved next door to me would have been any trouble. In fact, at first they seemed like okay neighbors, and I didn't think I would have any problems. You read the title though, so you know that it obviously didn't last forever, and the piece ended harshly one night that I was having a little party outside. Where I live there are technically no quiet hours, but people tend to be respectful and not party too loud or too late. So, we were all in my backyard talking and we had music playing at what I felt was a standard volume. I heard pounding on my gate though and went over to see who was there at this hour. It was my neighbor, and he did not seem happy. His wife wasn't there, so I assumed she was back at their house or something. Me. Hey, how are you? Neighbor. How am I? My head is pounding because you are blasting this music. Me. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's pretty low now honestly, but I could probably turn it down a little more if you want. Neighbor. Low? It's way too loud. Plus, you guys are all screaming out here and I don't want anybody getting drunk and climbing over the fence onto my property. I was very confused about what he was saying, but I wanted to be a good neighbor and help comply. Me. Okay, well, I will turn the music down like I said. Also, I promise that nobody here is drunk and going to hop a fence. The most anyone had was a couple of beers. Besides, we are starting to wind down soon anyway. This seemed to be good enough for him and I saw him go back towards his house. I thought I smelt something strange on him at that point, but since I had a little alcohol in my system, I assumed I was just thinking things and ended up brushing it off. He didn't come back, and the end of the party went well without any more complaints. I honestly thought that would be the end of the entire problem. If only I knew just how crazy this guy was, then I would have known to run for the hills. The next day is when things really got nuts, as I went outside to find neighbor actually in my backyard. He had gasoline, a lighter, and was starting to set a fire in my backyard. It has actually caught onto my patio, and before I knew it my house was on fire. Upon seeing me he bolted and hoped the fence just like he was worried about them doing. I could hear him yelling something about me being too loud, but I was more focused on the fact there was a fire in front of me. I quickly called the police, and a fire truck and officers were at my house within minutes. Me and my wife were waiting away from the fire on the porch of the lady that lived across the street. She was a sweetheart and made us cups of coffee because it was so early, and we had the scare of our lives. The fire was put out and our patio was damaged, but everything else seemed okay. No smoke really got in the house, so everything was going to be fine on that front. It didn't matter though that nobody got hurt when it came to the matter the police really wanted to know. Since I had seen him doing it with my own 2 eyes, it was enough for the police to go to his house and arrest him on the spot. I didn't know what the charges for arson even were in this state, but he was coming out of the house seemingly desperate to insist that this entire thing was my fault. Neighbor. I had to do it. She was being too loud. They were throwing a crazy party and I asked them like 10 times to turn it down and they wouldn't. I wasn't really burning down the entire house. The police were ignoring him while reading him his rights and putting him in the back of the police vehicle. What I didn't expect was the next thing I saw. His wife coming out of the house in cuffs, acting just as erratic as he had been. I know she didn't light my house on fire, so I was curious to why she was being arrested. The police wouldn't tell me though. All they could say was that the arrests were no longer pertaining to just me and they couldn't disclose anything. The next couple days their house had been roped off with cops going in and out of it. I actually thought they might have been so crazy to have a dead body in there or something. A few days later I finally saw on the local news I get to my phone what had happened to cause her to be arrested as well. It turns out that when the police went into the house to arrest him the entire place smelled like meth. Everything was right out in the open and the wife was even standing over the stove cooking the stuff. That would definitely explain the crazy behavior and even trying to set my house on fire. He was charged for the arson, but it was clear that the courts were more interested in the fact they had pounds of meth in their house with clear intent to sell it. I was called in one day to testify about the arson and told not to talk about anything else. Even without meth in his system he still tried to argue that it was my fault for being too loud that caused him to have to try and set my house on fire. Obviously nobody was believing this crazy guy and it was found that he had to pay for the damages to my patio. The only problem with that was he no longer had any money. All of his drug money which was cash had been confiscated and while being in jail he didn't really have any way to get more. You could win a lawsuit for $1 million but if the person doesn't have anything you can't really collect. Luckily we had a friend that was a contractor that was willing to give us a decent deal on fixing the patio. Honestly I didn't mind spending the money if it meant that I never had to have anything to do with my crazy meth-selling neighbors again. Who knows how long before the house airs out enough and they can sell it to someone that I hope is more normal. The next story is titled, Trespasser Demands I Replace His Car. Okay, so I'm going to preface this post by saying that the entrance to my property is a standard driveway through roughly 20 meters of wooded area, before the driveway opens up to about the same size as a standard American 2-lane roadway. My home sits about 500 meters back off of the road and I've sculpted my driveway, as well as a pass in front of my home and a lot of my backyard into a drift track. We have 2 giant no trespassing signs at the road-facing side of the woods as well as a speed limit 15 inches sign 10 meters beyond the woods, mainly to remind my friends to not be dickheads on their way in when the track isn't hot. Everything is above board with the county, my homeowner's insurance and local PD. Now with that out of the way, I went to the port today to pick up a much-awaited 1997 Nissan Stagea. We are building for my mate. As the mate and I are pulling down the drive in the truck, pulling the trailer with the car on it, my mate yells, "What in the hell is that?" and points off to the corner of the paved part of my property where I have a medium-sized shed which I keep landscaping things like a tractor, golf cart, etc. in. I look over to see the nose of a 2016 to 2017 Mustang stick out of a now collapsed shed and a guy laying on the pavement next to it. We immediately drove straight over, with haste. As we pull up our EP sits up from his prone position and starts yelling about suing me, calling me an a-hole and a bunch of other names. I yelled as loud as I could, "Hey." Then said, "Who the duck are you and what are you doing on my property? Why is your car in my shed?" To which EP responds, "I'm going to sue you as your racetrack isn't safe and you owe me a new car." By the point my mate is already on the phone with 911 and has hopped back into the truck. I explained to EP that he's trespassing and in fact he owes me a shed, and probably a few other things including a tractor. EP starts to limp toward me screaming that he's going to own my property and I won't have a pot to piss in when he's done with me. I decide to just get back into the truck and wait on police. Roughly 15 minutes later 2 police cars come screaming down my drive with their lights and sirens on and see EP beating on the window of my truck with his hands. PD immediately handcuff him and then my mate and I step out of the truck. EP told police that he has been driving past my property all summer and hearing engines and tires squelching from the roadway and finally decided that he was going to run a few laps today. That he saw the "no trespassing" signs but didn't think they were there for him. Who else would they be there for though? EP was arrested on malicious destruction of property. A tow company in town came and impounded his vehicle, and I was finally able to see that the entire shed and everything in it is a total loss. EP did leave in an ambulance though he should be fine. Insurance is going to have a field day with this one. I'd just like to add that that particular shed sits 25 feet off of the paved surface. I really hope next year doesn't have as many stressful events as this one. I'm starting by adding a gate with a code to enter the property this week. The next story is entitled Karen in the Express Line at the Walmart. Malicious compliance is attained. For context, the lines were extra long at Walmart today and they only had half the registers open. They decided to open another express line to get the crowds moving a bit. This Karen with an overflowing cart sees this and seizes the opportunity and rushes to get in line. Keep in mind this line is 20 items or less, she has way more. The employee trying to wrangle the crowd and trying to direct shoppers toward express, regular, self-service tries to get her to the regular line or the self-serve. She huffed and puffed at him in her Karen way about how she will do as she likes. Not wanting to deal with a fight, he lets it go while shooting a warning gaze to the express cashier about this joy of a human being. When the Karen gets up to the cash and starts literally dumping her stuff all over the belt while loudly mumbling about all the incompetent employees, the cashier gently but firmly tells her that she cannot go through this cash with her cart full. This cash is for 20 items or less. An argument from the Karen ensues. She is here now, so why not cash her out? That the cashier has to check her out or she could lose her stupid little job, etc., etc. She went on for about 10 long minutes while the line is building up behind her. The cashier is as cool as a cucumber throughout but doesn't budge that Karen could not go through this line with that many items, that she was welcome to join one of the other non-express lines, that the express line is just that, to let people with a few items go quicker to ease the rest of the lines. Karen continues to argue, now asking in an aggressive manner why they can't send the rest of the people in line to another cashier so this one could help Karen with her 100 items, reasoning that it would be quicker. A manager who was watching all this go down does just that, jumps on the next open register and tells the people in line that she can assist them. Manager shoots the cashier a knowing look. Karen is looking smug and superior at this point, thinking she has won. Wrong. As soon as the manager opens the other register, the cashier tells the Karen, "Sorry, I am on break, this till is closed. Please feel free to join one of the non-express lines." Karen yells at the manager to make the cashier cash her out. The manager says no, she is on break. Please feel free to join one of the non-express lines. Karen is getting pissed at this point. She quickly shovels her stuff back in her cart and tries to shove to the front in the new express line. The manager is still as cool and says, "This line is for 20 items and less. I will be unable to assist you. Please feel free to join any non-express line." Karen is absolutely enraged at this point and storms out of the store, leaving her cart behind and screaming about how she will never shop here again and that she will have both of their jobs, etc., etc. The best part? In her rage, she forgot her purse in the cart and had to come back for it. The manager was only one of two on duty and she was still helping to check out the line. The purse was at the cash. The manager made Karen wait in line to get her purse. Karen didn't say a word. The last story is titled, "You Can't Reserve Seats on Public Transport." We, my aunt and uncle, cousin, and dad, were on a long sightseeing ferry ride. It was a 2-hour ride with one stop in the middle. We were the first to get on the ferry, so all of us blocked the window seats in a straight line. It's public transport and there's no concept of reservation, it's first come first serve. We were sitting in the air-conditioned cabin and had the option of going out on the main deck. Just as we stopped in the middle, my dad went out on the main deck to take some pictures and enjoy the fresh air. Another man gets on the ferry at this stop and takes my dad's window seat, though there were a few other window seats left. My aunt and I told him a number of times quite politely that someone is sitting there, but he only said, "I speak French," and proceeded to not hear us. My dad came back and told him he was sitting there, and this man called the security and complained about my dad. The security told my dad, "Sir, this is public transport, seats cannot be reserved." My dad said, "All right," and sat down next to him. So the scene right now is, window man, my dad, empty seat aisle. About 10 minutes later, the man was about to step out on the deck. He left his bag on the seat and got up to leave. My dad asked him to kindly remove his bag. He refused. So, my dad refused to get up and move to let him out. My dad said, "You can't reserve seats, you showed me the rule, kindly follow it yourself." He became very flustered and started clapping his hands and calling for security. Security was also on the deck for the time being, but a barista was there. This man called the barista to help, who didn't understand French either, so he told them in Arabic that my dad was refusing to move to let him out of the seat. The barista was flabbergasted and asked my dad why. I know Arabic, so I intervened and clarified the situation, that is, the man was keeping his bag and reserving his seat, which he told my dad is not allowed. By this time, the man has sorta climbed over my dad, to go and call the security, and my dad hasn't budged. Keep in mind that my dad isn't a small man and is quite big with broad shoulders, and the sight of a tiny Frenchman climbing around him was really funny. The security came in and the guy is still feeding them part of the whole story in Arabic. When they came to ask my dad, he said, "You told me moments ago that reserving seats aren't allowed." He was keeping his bag and going out to the deck, thus reserving his seat because no one would sit down in a seat with a bag in it. The security told him he wasn't allowed to do that and removed his bag. Now my dad got up and told him that he can sit beside the window. My dad just wanted to prove a point, and came and sat beside me. The man was fuming and muttering, "Camera, police," and a number of colorful French abuses, which I know because I have a French friend. He's glaring at us as I'm writing this, and guess what? He isn't sitting on the window seat anymore. Edit. For everyone saying we should not have blocked a bunch of window seats, firstly, the ferry was mostly empty, and a lot of window seats were empty because we went during non-peak hours. Secondly, it was a vacation, all of us paid for the seats and wanted to have the best experience. It wasn't traveling from point A to point B. It was a sightseeing tour, and we wanted the best views individually, not sit as a group and have one person enjoy it. And no one was screaming to talk to others. We might take the best seats, but we are still courteous. Edit 2. My dad didn't call security the first time, or the second. In both instances the man called security. The first time, my dad requested him once and he said he doesn't speak English and got the security involved. Thank you for listening.